As you can see today, we're going to be dealing with listening. We've titled it, Did You Hear What I Heard? And listening, I thought, was something which we were all pretty good at. However, after the last webinar, where we dealt with the receptive skills, of which listening is one, I got quite a few emails and 1 or 2 questions asked regarding strategy and the hows and whys, how to improve our score at listening. So it was obviously of a bit more concern than I'd thought. I thought everybody was more concerned with writing, but there was quite a number of you who wanted to know about listening. So I've taken it a little bit further this time, and we're going to look at some strategies we can use to maximize your listening. Okay, that's one thing I'd like to do now. Can everybody hear me okay? Perhaps you could just put a little yes in the chat room, in the chat box, just to let me know that you can hear me okay. Oh, that's great. I'm seeing some yeses. So I'm presuming my audio is okay. Kate was not with us this morning. She's busy doing something else at the moment she can't avoid. So I haven't had a chance to check the audio, but you're telling me that it looks okay. That's great. So let's have a look at listening and see how we can help you score. So as we dealt with the last webinar, listening is a receptive skill. And it's quite difficult to listen at the level we need to be reaching. Obviously, we can all listen to some degree, but how much we get out of the listening, how much we understand, is going to be where your score ends up. And we need 7, or the doctors will need 7.5 at listening. So there's not really any substitute for practicing, because we learn to listen by listening. It's a primary thing. We learn to speak by listening, but there's nothing that comes first for listening. We listen and then we learn how to listen. So really there's no excuse to get as much as we can in. So practicing all the time. I know some of you use English at work, others don't, but you've studied in English, you're looking to get band 7, so you're going to need to get pretty used to hearing a variety of English on all sorts of different topics. So no substitute for practice. Get as much as you can in through your ears. I'll tell you later that the sort of thing we can use to maximize that. So I suggest, of the 2 receptive skills, I think listening is more difficult than reading. You might be getting better scores at listening, but that's probably because you've done more of it. So listening appears to be more difficult. Think for a moment, why could listening be more difficult than reading? And maybe we could have a few suggestions in the chat box. So why is listening more difficult than reading? So no need for sentences, just a few words, a few key words as to why it might be. Yeah, somebody's saying only played once. Yeah. In the IELTS test, it would be great if we could say, again, please. But unfortunately, one chance only. The focus, yes, it may not be something that we're used to. The topic or focus could be a very unfamiliar subject. It might be something we've never heard about before. A lot of distractions in listening, for sure. There may be background noise. There might be different accent, different dialect. We'll have a look at that in a moment. Pronunciation, somebody's saying. Yes. Or the audio played only once and the speakers speak fast sometimes. Yes, they do. Yep. Once you miss, everything might be messed up. Indeed. Yeah, I go on to talk about that one. That's from Richard. Yes, Richard, you're right. You can lose your place in the questions. Sometimes you can't understand the accent. Yeah, that's why it's important that we get as much variety as possible. We should listen to as many different accents as we can. The tone of voice, yes. We can put a lot across in our tone. We can say the same word in many different ways, and it subtly or sometimes quite dramatically changes the meaning. For example, I might hear you say something and I'll say, really? Which shows I'm interested. Or you might hear me say, really? And from that, you should be able to pick up that I'm bored. Or I might say, really? And I'm a bit angry. Or, really? I doubt it. I think that this might not be true, what I'm hearing. So yes, the tone can affect in many ways. Sometimes you can't understand the accent, tone of voice. Many speakers, yes, that's come from Hervik, yeah. The many speakers one is sometimes quite a problem. If you're not used to hearing a range of accents or distinguishing different speakers, the fact that there are 4 speakers, that there's usually 3 or 4, occasionally I've heard 5 in IELTS. When there are that number of speakers, it's hard to know when the turn passes, and it's hard to keep track of names. So there are clues at the end or the beginning of the speaking. Usually at the end they'll say, oh, I'm not sure of that. What does Tom think? You've been there, haven't you, Tom? So you know that Tom is the next person to speak. So that can be useful sometimes. Or, oh, I don't know, Mary, what do you think? Or Mary, perhaps you can tell us. And you've got clues from the handover time. So let's have a look at a summary of what makes listening more difficult than reading. So many of you said the speed of speech. Yes, sometimes it can be fairly fast. Native speakers can ramp up the speed to something approaching 300 words a minute. So if I'm on the telephone and I'm speaking to my sister, I might go at this speed and she'll be able to understand me. I'm now coming back down and I'm talking at about 100 to 120 words per minute. And that's the usual sort of speed you'll hear in IELTS. However, sometimes 1 or 2 of them can go a little bit faster and it'll be at this sort of speed. But if the vocabulary is not too difficult, it's quite easy to keep up with that. It becomes a problem when they start to talk about specialist vocabulary such as Le Chavalier's theory of dynamic equilibrium is quintessentially, and so on. That's difficult at that sort of speed. So if you heard it at a lower speed, today we're going to look at Le Chavalier's theory of dynamic equilibrium, quintessentially written for, and then you can hear each word, which is important if it's a topic you know nothing about. Then we have, as some people mentioned, the accent or the dialect of the speaker. Dialect is not so important in IELTS. The difference between these, accent is the same word, but pronounced in a different way. So maybe you get bath or bath, both okay, not one is better, one is worse. They're both okay, but they're different. So the accent can change the sound of the word, but not the meaning, that the word is still the same. We've got things like enquiry and inquiry. It's the same word, but in American English, I think they even spell it with an I. So the accent changes. Offense, offense. Same word, different accent, different stress patterns. Dialect is where a new word is used to describe something. I'm going to use British English and American English again. I say pavement, an American would say sidewalk. So you've got this new word to describe a familiar thing to me, but of course it works the other way. The strange word to an American is pavement. He calls it a sidewalk. So pavement was the dialect word for the American speaker. A couple of you mentioned that you're not in control of repeats. We hear it only once. Wouldn't it be nice if we could say, can you play that again? But no, it's one time only. And tied up with that, there are no visual clues. Listening when I'm on the telephone is far harder than if I'm watching the person. If you can see the person's face and you can see expressions and gestures, if you can see that, you're far better equipped to understand even quite high level English. But when the clues have gone, when you can't see the expressions and the gestures, that's more difficult. So IELTS, it's only once. You can't see the speaker. It might be fast. There might be a different accent. On top of that, unfamiliar topic. A couple of you mentioned that too. Unfamiliar topics, therefore new vocabulary, which in a way act like dialect. You might know what the things are, but when they've got a new label for one discipline or one field of study, might call things by a different name, then it's doubly difficult. And if that weren't enough, you've got the stress of all the other tests that you'll be taking that day. Possibly the speaking comes that day as well. I know some of you have speaking on separate days, but you'll have at least three tests to do. So it's tricky. Don't underestimate it. And I must admit, I thought the listening takes care of itself, but perhaps it doesn't. Perhaps we need to do some more detailed listening to help us, some varied input and more practice. So strategies to help us, if only the strategies make us feel less stressful, so we can better attack the reading and the writing and the speaking perhaps. So strategies just to make the listening easier and to make our performance more effective. So there are some things that we can do, or perhaps that we need to know, that will make it easier. And the most important is to read the questions. That's the gem of wisdom I'm going to give you today. Read the questions. Sometimes at the end of each section through the listening, you will hear the voice, the sort of MC, if you like, the one who reads out the question types and gives you the instructions. He, at the end of each section, says, you now have 30 seconds to check your answers. If you're confident that you've written your answers, use those 30 seconds not to look back, because you can't hear it to compare it. It's not effective to think back. Use those 30 seconds to read ahead, to sort out in your mind what you'll be listening to. So read the questions, take as much time as you can in the half hour, and from this reading you can then predict what word class or kind of answer, if you like, the kind of answer that's required. So word class, I mean, is it an adjective, a noun, an adverb? Is it going to be a phrase? We need to read the questions to see whether they asked for one word, two words, three words, and or a number. If it says no more than 3 words, 1 is fine, 2 is fine, 3 is good, and small words like in, on, at, prepositions, they're okay. So you might write 4 words in there. What you shouldn't be doing if it says 3 words is writing any numbers in figures. If it wants words, you'll need to write 3 as THREE. You're given permission to write figures when it says select 3 words, or what a phrase of 3 words and or a figure. Then you can use numbers, and or a number, I would say. Then you can use your figures. Okay, so predicting is important. It lets you know what you're listening for, because if we just look at the question without analyzing it deeply, then you just hear a wall of sound coming at you. But when you've predicted what you're listening for, you can pick out these words when you hear them. You won't know the exact word, but you'll have an idea. Okay, this is a noun about travel, perhaps. So it could be the name of a type of transportation that you're looking for. Let's have a go, see what we can do. So, predicting. There are several which are not included. Well, this gap here, several what? Is it going to be a verb, a noun, an adjective, an adverb, a conjunction? What's this word going to be? Well, there are several which are not included. This has got to be a noun, hasn't it? Or perhaps a noun phrase. It might be an adjective or 2 and a noun, but it's got to be a noun. So here you'll be listening for some things, because they've said several, which are not included in another larger group. So a small sort of subset which is not included in another group. When you hear that in the listening, there's your answer. If the question has told you using no more than 3 words, we might be able to get 2 adjectives and a noun, but it's certainly a noun or a noun phrase. Okay, so let's have a look at the next one. There have been many ways suggested to the type of glass required. Well, whenever I say to, it's either a preposition about traveling to a place, or here it's got to be a verb when you look at it closely. There have been many ways suggested to select the type of glass, to manufacture, to make. Some sort of verb would fit in there grammatically. It's not going to be an adjective, it's not going to be a noun. So a little bit of analysis has told us that we're looking for a verb there. And it's probably a base verb. It won't have an ed or an ing. In fact, it won't have ing because we've got 2. So it'll be a base verb, a verb 1 if you like. Okay. Now, the next one. None of the glass has been suitable. Well, we've got a noun with glass, and we've got the article here connected to glass. So the only thing is going to be an adjective. Or maybe, no, an adjective would make it to a compound noun. Yeah, this is going to be an adjective. So you're listening now for some describing word to tell you what kind of glass, what sort of glass. It might be something like, none of the previous glass has been suitable, or none of the tested glass, none of the suggested glass has been suitable. So some sort of adjective will go in there. Once you're armed with that sort of information, once you know roughly what's coming, then you know when to stop listening. Those of you who have listened to the webinar about reading, I talk about that a lot. You know in one section what it's about because it's written very well. Well, let me tell you about the listening. The listening is as carefully prepared as the reading. So let's do a little more prediction, and then I'll go on to tell you what I mean about when to stop looking. So what do you think is going to be here? Coca-Cola was invented in. Well, it could be in a laboratory, but it probably means a year. Coca-Cola was invented in, and I think it's 1888. It's older than we think. So Coca-Cola was invented in 1888. It's probably a date, a year, because it says in, it's going to be a year. It might be a season. It might be something like in the summer. It's unlikely, but it's time related. Okay. Now, who invented the process of converting iron into steel? This one doesn't ask for a word in a gap. This is a separate answer. There's the whole question. And then we have to, whoops, let's go back. And then we have to supply the missing word. So who invented the process of converting iron into steel? Well, somewhere in the listening you'll hear that it was a man called Bessemer. And he invented the Bessemer converter, which converted iron into steel. So who? Well, there's a good indication that this is a name. So when you hear a name, that's probably your answer. It gets trickier if there are 2 or 3 names. Then you've got to listen carefully to find out what was connected with the invention of the process of conversion. Here's one. How many cars are returned to their owners each year after having been stolen? This is going to be a number. And IELTS can be a little bit tricky at times. You might hear in the listening that they say 1 million cars are stolen each year. Only 25% of those are returned to their owners after being recovered. And then if you've got a question like this, you've heard the answer, but you heard 25%. So if we wrote 25% in here, is it the answer to how many? No. If you had the answer 25%, you'll have to do a bit of simple maths and convert that to 250,000. You wouldn't have to write that out in figures if you'd been given permission. Use 3 words and/or a number in your answer. So if you heard 25% of 1 million and saw how many, your answer's 250,000. Okay, let's move on. So the troublesome questions in reading, I know from your questions and from queries you've had, are yes, no, not given. Well, unfortunately, they come up in listening too. Not as often, I must admit, but there are still yes, no, not given, or possibly true, false, not given. And as I talked about in reading, about knowing when to stop reading, the strategy for listening is similar. You need to know when to stop listening for the not givens. You can't know whether something is not given until you reach the end of the section or the part which is about that topic. But as I hinted at earlier, the listening is carefully prepared, just like the reading passages. So from the reading, I told you that in all good writing, which is what you're reading, one topic is equal to 1 paragraph. So IELTS uses texts, and here's something you may not know. Texts can also be spoken. We get fooled by thinking textbook, and we think, oh, text, that's written. But a text is not just writing. Anything which hangs together as a whole, which is connected, is a text. So usually it's written, yes. But if you hear a connected series of information which leads from one topic to another, or a description of something, or directions. That would be a text when it hangs together as a cohesive, as a structured, well-structured piece of English, so, or any language. So a text, usually written, I'll admit, but a text could be a listening. So when you hear the listening, particularly the longer monologues, those are certainly texts. So where would you listen? You need to find that out. You need to listen to the clues. And it's very important to know when to stop. So when you hear the end of that section, obviously you can't see it, but when you hear the end, and I'm going to show you in a moment how you know it's the end, when you hear the end of a section and you haven't heard positive, negative information, you can then say with confidence, that's a not given. I didn't hear anything about that. They talked around the topic, but I didn't hear definite yes or definite no, so there's your not given. Just like in reading, you'll be listening for positive information with there are, there is, this is so, yes, there are. Anything with a positive tone about it is a yes. And when you hear the negatives, you'll hear words which begin with N. Negative, none, nothing, not, never. So all the no's around about words which start with N usually. There aren't, oh, even aren't any would be are not. So yes, there'll be an N word in most of them. So how do we know when to decide? That's it. We've heard that section. We can confidently say not given. Well, it's with the things which make this not a series of bullet-pointed statements, but the things which hold it together as a listening text. And they're called cohesive devices. So cohesive devices glue together and help the listener or the reader to follow what's being said or what's been written. And you'll hear phrases like, now, turning to, well, that's the speaker's way of saying, okay, I've finished this part, we're going to look at something new. So if the next part is about a different topic, then you can decide whether you heard a yes, no, or a not given. If we examine this next reason, that's common, or a simple moving on. Or perhaps you've had 2 or 3 reasons for something, or 2 or 3 comments, and then the speaker says, perhaps though, the most important aspect is, what comes next is number 1. This is the real, the crux, the most important part. I said most important there. The bit possibly which is your main answer. So use these cohesive devices to help you decide, new topic here, moving on, the next question, which is about something else, it must be in here. And if you've missed something, if you really didn't hear the answer to something, and it moves on to a completely different topic, don't sweat, don't panic there. Just move on to the next one. Remember, IELTS is marked positively. If you guess, your mark won't go down. So if you've really missed something, just get on with the next question when you hear the topic of the next question come up. So we can only do that if we've predicted. So this skill of predicting ahead is most useful. You need to learn how to do that, to know when things have moved on. And just not to panic. If all else fails, wait until the rest of the the room turns the page, and then you know the next question is at the top of that page. That's where you are in the listening. That's an emergency get out. For band 7, you shouldn't have to do that, but just in case. Okay, so moving on. I'd like to try one now. So in the test, you'll hear you now have half a minute to look at, or you have half a minute to check. Use all of this spare time, which they tell you about. Use this to read ahead. So here is some from a part 4 in a listening. This is where you hear one person speaking on a technical subject. This one is about containment methods for oil spills. I don't know how many of you work in the oil spillage business, but I don't. So it was quite interesting when I heard this. Don't get too bogged up in the interest of the listening, but read the questions very, very carefully. Read the questions, predict ahead. This one I'm doing to begin with for you is a little easier. It's multiple choice. They're always more popular. With multiple choice, your strategies are usually 2 that you can throw away, 2 that are more likely. When you've got only 3 choices, as we have here, A, B, C, they might be all plausible, all possible. IELTS, though, usually has a couple which are not really there. They're just there to distract you, to get you off on the wrong track. So you can throw 2 away and you'd be left with 2, usually quite close in meaning. One of them's better than another, or in this way, 3 of them which are all possible. If they had 4 that was possible, that would be awful, but they only do you 3. So I hope that the audio works for you. I've got it that it starts at 13:50, so let's see if I can get that to begin for you. But first, though, we should read ahead, shouldn't we? The most important. So 31, Japan relies on oil tankers because the country consists of islands. That's possible, isn't it? If they're islands, you'll need these big ships, these big oil tankers. Of course, it presumes that you know what an oil tanker is. If you don't, you do now. An oil tanker is a bulk oil carrier, a ship, maybe 300-400 meters long, massive ship. You need a bicycle to go from one end to the other quickly. So the country consists of islands, possibly. The country has no pipeline network. Well, that too is possible, isn't it? The country has no natural oil resources. Well, thinking at it from another point of view, not logistically, but from need, that's possible too. So here we'll just have to think which of these is closest. So I don't think we would hear these exact phrases. When we see something like, the country has no pipeline network, you might hear something like, infrastructure of distribution by pipe, or the country consists of islands. The country is made up of a number of discrete islands. So you won't hear consists of. It'll be synonymous phrases. How about the country has no natural oil resources? You might hear no oil around the country, something like that. So natural and resources you may not hear. But so long as you know that it means the same, you should be okay. Now, Professor Wilson says that oil tankers are, well, from this we know that the speaker's called Professor Wilson. And there are 3 choices. A, very safe. B, quite safe. C, quite unsafe. Right, well, 3 of them have got safe in one form or another. 2 of them have got quite. So we'll have to be listening quite carefully here, or possibly we might not hear safe at all. We might hear a synonymous phrase, but for this question, we're looking at the safety of oil tankers. Okay. 33. According to Professor Wilson, the main cause of oil slicks is. Now, an oil slick, it presumes that you know what this means. An oil slick is oil lying on top of water. You all know that oil and water don't mix, and that oil floats on the top. So an oil slick, if we poured oil on the water, it spreads out as thin as it possibly can, but still stays above the water. So that large area of oil floating on the water is called a slick. So according to Professor Wilson, he says that the cause of these, the main cause, is accidents while loading and unloading oil, collisions, or deliberate releases of oil. Well, my feeling is it could be any of those, it could be all of those, but here the main word, the key word is the main cause. So the main cause of oil slicks will be one of these. I suspect you'll hear all three of them, but one of them might have that sort of phrase, but chief amongst these, or but the one which contributes most, or the most likely cause is. So one of them will have been graded higher, and you'll know that it's the main cause. Though I suspect you might hear about all of them, or perhaps a couple of them. Then question 34. According to the professor, we know his name was Wilson now, according to the professor, slicks are rarely burned off nowadays. You'd have thought if it was oil, you could set fire to it and problem over. But the professor says they don't do that very often. Three possible reasons. A, the oil is refined. Okay. Or B, it usually doesn't work. Okay. Or C, it creates too much air pollution. So we've got water pollution, and if we burn it, we'd create air pollution. Or possibly it doesn't burn. Maybe the type of oil they have doesn't burn, or the oil is refined. He might explain a reason why this means it's not burned off. We'll have to listen. So the recording begins at 1350. We've looked at these, we've predicted, we've had a little bit of thought. Let's see how we do with these. So let me get this to start. Okay.
This recording is copyright.
I'll have to take it this way.
Oil tankers are the largest ships to sail in the ocean. For countries such as Japan that have no oil deposits of their own, tankers are the only way that oil needed to power their economies can be moved. They are designed to hold millions of barrels of crude or refined oil in reasonable safety and without damage to the environment. When oil is released from these ships, the oil spreads out over the surface of the water in a large slick. These oil slicks can cover hundreds of miles, and they cause huge environmental damage. Oil is released for varying reasons. Accidents while loading and unloading and deliberate spills account for many slicks today, but it is ships hitting other ships or rocks which is the major cause of slicks. Because oil slicks are so damaging to the environment, numerous ways of containing them and cleaning them up have been developed. In previous years, slick cleaners would sometimes try to set fire to the slicks and burn them off, but that is rarely done nowadays because, surprisingly, nearly all oil slicks consist of compounds that aren't flammable. Combustibility comes after refining. The four ways of cleaning up oils.
Okay. So, Japan relies on oil tankers because, well, let's do this in chat, shall we? So question 31, do you think it's A, B, or C? So if you could write 31, A, B, or C in the chat. Okay. Right, consensus of opinion going for C. Correct. Yes, we heard that Japan has no oil of its own. So we heard oil and a negative there. Okay. How about 32? What did Professor say about the oil tankers? Did he go for A, B, or C? So 32 and then the letter. Lots of you going for B. Quite safe. Yes, he said in reasonable safety, I think. So reasonable, not very, and not negative. Reasonable safety. So that's a synonymous phrase with quite safe. Well done. Okay, 33. According to the professor, the main cause was what? A, B, or C? So 33 and your choice. 33, it's B, 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 B. Yep, collisions. Either the oil tanker hits another ship or some land, a rock, a bit of solid earth, not the sea. Well done. And 34, according to the professor, slicks are rarely burned off because, and what did you think, A, B, or C? 34. Okay. Some of you've gone for A, the oil is refined. Well, he did say he did say about refined. He said combustibility comes after refining, but he said it usually doesn't work. The crude oil consists of compounds which, strangely enough, are quite difficult to set fire to. So burning a slick off rarely works. So it doesn't usually work because it's not going to burn. Only after refining is it something which will burn. So well done. I hope that the prediction helped there. We got the bulk of those correct from everybody, so well done. Now, let's go and hear the next few questions. Okay, it's the same listening. We're now going to listen to the next section. It's about the containment methods. So he talked about the background, why we need oil carriers, why Japan, for instance, needs oil carriers, oil tankers. And now he's going to talk about generally slicks. These are not in Japan, these are wherever they might occur around the world. So we've got a summary table with techniques, and we've got 4 techniques which might be used to contain an oil slick, to stop it getting worse. And we have a column for advantages and a column for disadvantages. So we need to now look at these and predict what sort of answer we'd listen to. So the containment boom, its advantage is cheap and easy. It's got a disadvantage though, it's only good when there are. Well, this is some sort of quality when there are what? It's probably an adjective and a noun. It might be just a noun, but it would be a plural noun too. So because it's are, not is, there'll be probably an adjective and probably a noun with an S. Okay. Chemical detergents, good for treating. Well, I guess that's a noun phrase of some sort. So again, adjective, noun. Grammatically, nothing else is going to fit that. The chemicals remain in the water. Well, that's a disadvantage. You get one bit of pollution and exchange it for another, maybe not so good. And the next thing is called the sponge. Must be a big sponge. Oil remains permanently in the sponge. Advantage. Okay, I guess you soak up the oil and it stays there. Disadvantage, the sponge mats turn into, it's going to be a noun phrase, probably probably an adjective, noun, possibly just a noun. Okay. Bacteria. Cheap, easy to administer, totally. This is going to be some sort of quality, probably an adjective. Maybe totally safe, totally effective, perhaps. So some sort of quality adjective. And then 39, wow, IELTS, naughty. No clues. Disadvantages, nothing. What we do know, though, would be it's probably not more than 3 words. It'll be 1, 2, or 3 words. Okay, so this one starts at 1444. Let me see how I can get that set for you.
This recording is copyright. IELTS Help Now Listening Practice Tests. Test 1. In the IELTS test, you hear some recordings and you have to answer questions on them. You have time to hear the union parties.
There we are. Right. Let's go back. Not working for us. Now, 1444 is where we need to begin. Jammed up. Let me see if restarting the PowerPoint might be helpful. Oh, appear to have come back again. Let's give this. No, what I'll do is start it again. So let me just put this to the bottom. Okay. Let's find this one again. So from current slide. All right, I'm going to try and share my screen once more. See if we can get the audio back. There we are. So 1444.
Most common method of cleaning up after an oil spill. Barriers are erected in the water and the oil is then sucked up. Basically, a containment boom is just a large float that surrounds and contains the slick. This method is cheap and straightforward, however only functions in very calm seas. Another method to clean slicks is to spray detergent solution from airplanes or boats directly onto the spill. Depending on the detergent, 2 things can
Seem to have lost the audio there.
happen. One possible result is that the oil can break up into clumps, which sink to the bottom of the ocean. Although these clumps are themselves hazardous, the problems caused by the clumps are much easier to deal with than the problems caused by oil slicks. The other possibility is that the oil then breaks down into tiny droplets, which are soon spread and become harmless. This method is well suited to dealing with the larger slicks. A negative aspect is that often the chemicals remain in the water, and they can kill fish and other marine life. A Berlin-based company has developed an alternative method for cleaning up oil spills. EcoCarbon has invented a giant sponge made of lignite resin that sucks up the oil, preventing it from harming the environment. The sponge comes as a mat, which contains crushed coal, whose small granules can soak up large amounts of oil. The process is safe and cheap. The sponges have so far withstood small-scale testing in pools of water with miniature oil slicks. A unique advantage is that once the oil is absorbed into the mat, it remains fixed there permanently. The downside, however, is that the mats become toxic waste. Scientists are also trying to improve other methods to fight oil spill. At the scenes of oil spills around the world, they found bacteria that seem to have an appetite for the toxic black sludge. Now the scientists are breeding these bacteria and studying them to determine which is the most effective at reducing oil levels. Eventually they hope to put the best bacteria to work in helping clean up after oil spill disasters. The bacteria actually use the oil as food. As the bacteria reproduce, they eat more and more of the slick until it finally vanishes. Eventually, this method should be cheap, easy to administer, and be completely eco-friendly, as when the slick is gone, the bacteria's food source is gone, and they die, leaving nothing behind at all. So far, this method has no discernible drawbacks. Well, that's the end of the section of the lecture on cleaning up spills. This subject is an optional essay for your course. You'll find the reading lists and essay questions on the faculty notice boards along with a deadline for submission. If you choose it, seminars will be held at a later date.
That is the end of section 4. You'll now have half a minute to check your answers.
Okay. So,
this recording is
stop
copyright.
again.
IELTS Help Now listening practice tests. Test 1. In the IELTS test, you hear some recordings and you have to answer questions.
Stop this again. Let me just stop that from the PowerPoint and we'll go back to it. Okay, let me share my screen once more with you. Okay, so once again using the chat facility, let's see what we got for 35. So perhaps you could write your answer for 35. What do you think that would be? Oh, people have done the whole thing. Oh, thank you, Richard. Effective as ever. 35, calm seas. Yeah, most of you got 35 as calm seas. 36. Do we got larger slicks? Yep. "36 slicks." Roland, you've got slicks. You'd get something for that. We were looking for larger slicks because slicks is what the whole thing was about. So be careful and pick up the adjectives as well. So larger slicks, bigger slicks even would have done it. 37. What have we got? Toxic waste. Yeah, 37 was toxic waste. Yeah, most of you've got that one. Good. 38. Got. Yeah, there's one. Eco-friendly. Eco-friendly. Good. Eco-friendly. Yeah. Got most of those. And the final one, 39. I wonder who got that one. Kimberly's saying none. Richard says no drawbacks. No discernment. That's not going to be the right answer, Axel. No, he did say no discernible, but no discernment would be wrong. There we are. We've got it from Jamie. No discernible drawbacks. That's the exact phrase. So 39 was nothing, no drawbacks. Okay, well done. I'm pleased with that. You've scored well on that one. Let's go to the next page. So, as I mentioned a little earlier, IELTS is positively marked if you do miss something. It's not going to reduce your score if you take a guess. So guess, if it's multiple choice, A, B, C, or D. If it's a word that you have to supply, go with your thoughts. If you're thinking, oh, is it this or that? Just pick one. You might be right. And as I say, it might be the difference between band 6.5 or that magic band 7. So, no way to shortcut listening. We learn to listen by listening. So get as much into your ears as you can. Listen to good quality English, BBC, CNN, Some films, films I'm saying are from the UK. Some movies, Hollywood. Yeah, some films are good. They've got lots of English in them, but some of them are not particularly good. You're spending a couple of hours and there's not much English in them, or you get a slang model. The British Council's websites are huge, massive sites full of listening exercises. Other sites, this one is with American accents. This is Randall's Cyber Listening Lab. Lots of useful listenings on there. But don't just stick with one. Listen to the BBC one day, CNN one day, British movie, American movie, British Council's website, an American one, Australian sites too. I don't know many Australian sites, but I know that there are some. So get as much variety as you can. Hear different accents, different ways of saying things. Okay. So another thing to remember, in the listening, it's not as cruel as the reading. In the listening, they always follow the order of the listening. So if you hear the answer to question 29 and you haven't got the answer to 28 yet, you've missed 28. It doesn't go backwards and forwards. It's as you listen in time order. So if you hear the answer to a question, you know you've missed the one before. Don't worry, move on, make a guess later, because there's no penalty for wrong answers. So I'll, at this point, with about 7 or 8 minutes to go, I'll ask, do you have any questions? So I'll look in the chat box to begin. What if no hyphen? For example, eco-friendly. Is it the same as eco-friendly? Yes, it would be. Hyphenated words are surprisingly fluid and flexible, actually, Mary. I live in a city called York, the original one, not the new one. I live in York and we have a race course. And depending which road you use to come into the city, you can see race course spelled in 3 ways. You can see race course, one compound noun. You can see race course, 2 separate words. And you can see race-course. They're all correct. So it doesn't really matter. It is the same if you see them like that. And some words are fixed as being compound nouns. For example, bedroom. You wouldn't get bed-room. But others are surprisingly flexible. Post office, for example. It's quite flexible. So don't worry too much about hyphens in words like this. Okay, any other questions today? I'll have a look at, oh, there's one in the Q&A as well, I see. I keep forgetting that one. Let's go into there. Hervig's asking, is it okay to use abbreviations, for example, in telling the time? Yes, I presume you mean here AM, PM, that sort of thing. Yes, you can use abbreviations in figures as well. If you've got million, you could just use M, or 1,000, you could say TH. So long as it's clear what you mean. If you used ZP, I wouldn't know what you meant. But yes, if it's a true abbreviation, fine, no problem. Oh, one more in Q&A. Jamie's asking, what if I write wind farms instead of wind farms? Well, I don't know yet which is the correct one. These are so new. We've only had them for a couple of decades. So a wind farm, how do you spell it? I don't know. Both of those are fine. I know what you mean with both of them. You might even see it wind-farm. So 3 would be 3 different ways of spelling it would be acceptable. So long as they're spelled correctly, I've got no problem with that. Thank you. Good question. Now, 2 in there. Any more questions? Maybe this is because you've done so well with listening and you're dying to ask me questions about writing. Now let's have a look. Someone else. Oh no, it's still just two. I thought another one had come. Here we are. Question from Roland. If the instruction says no more than 3 words and or a number, does that mean that we should answer at least 3 words? No, it doesn't. It could be 1, 2, or 3, or possibly 3 words and a number, or maybe just a number. What it doesn't require is 4 words. So at least 3, we should answer at least. Oh, you'll never see at least. Roland said if we saw at least 3 words. No, you'll get a maximum of 3 words. So at least not going to happen in IELTS. You'll see a maximum of 3 words. And or a number. No more than a maximum of. Yeah, I've seen both. I've seen no more and a maximum and or a number. Does that mean that we should answer at least 3 words? No. Certainly no. You could answer 3, 2, or 1 plus a number or just a number. But 4, no. Hervik's asking, is it okay to use like a $sign? What do you mean? Not a $sign, but something like it? Or a currency sign? Is it okay to use a currency sign? Yes, of course. Yeah, if you were talking about Japan, you might use the yen sign. Yeah, no reason why not. So long as that's a situation like Roland asked, where you might have a name and a number. So you might be able to write $14 or $14. That's fine. The sign would count as a word. So yeah, it is okay. It would be a good idea actually to just inform yourselves about which currencies take plurals or not. When I lived in Thailand, you could have 1 baht or 5 baht or 100 baht or 10,000 baht. Baht was never pluralized. And it tends to be that Asian currencies are not pluralized. Korean won, Burmese kyats, Thai baht. I'm not sure about in the Philippines. Do you pluralize peso? Can you have 10 pesos with an S? Or is it 1 peso, 500 peso, and it's never pluralized? I don't know. But inform yourself, because they're normally, oh, everybody's saying yes. So, you do have S. Thank you. Okay, so there's an exception. In Singapore, you have $1 or $5. They don't pluralize dollars there. But go across the sea to Australia, where they also use dollars, it's pluralized. So inform yourself which currencies take a plural S. And then your marks for vocabulary will go up. So thanks for that, new information for me. What's this? Is it fine if I catch their attention if the volume suddenly toned down? Even during playbacks, it's perfectly fine. Will they repeat it? No, the system should have been thoroughly tested. They won't play it again, except under circumstances of it breaking down. So if the volume suddenly, you mean the volume became less? I've never known it happen, but I guess if they had a problem with their equipment, they would have to. If they didn't, you could appeal that. Yeah, tricky one. Not sure, Angel. Is it fine if I catch their attention if the volume suddenly turns? Even during playback, it's perfectly fine. Will they repeat it? You know, they would ask you at the beginning, can everybody hear? They would check to see that the sound quality was good and say, can you hear at the back, and have some sort of testing thing. That's the time to say, I can't hear it. If it went down during the test, they've got a problem with equipment, and they probably would play it. But if the recording naturally is going down in volume, they won't replay. Question from Kimberly. What if there's a currency already given in the question? Is it safe if you write the currency again? If it asks for a blank and it's asking for a number and it says the clothing was priced at euro sign blank, if you then write 15 euros, what you've said is the clothing was priced at euro 15 euros. So that's wrong. So don't write it again. If it's in a question, if it's in an answer and this is more for writing, isn't it? If you hear it, write it down. If it's in part of the question, you won't need to, or you're just doubling up on it. Okay. Hervik's asking, is it okay to put the answers directly on the answer sheet? I wouldn't. I would use the 10 minutes at the end. You probably know the format. You'll have half an hour for the actual listening, where you can be putting the answers in your book. Is it okay to? There's no reason why you don't, but I suggest you'll make mistakes and get into you get a complicated situation. Also, if you get one line wrong, everything below that line is wrong. The marker might see what you've done, but it's not their job to correct it. So if you got answer 3 and you put it in answer 4, the rest of the questions are wrong, because the answer to 5 will be 6, the answer to 6 will be 7, and so on. And they're not going to, that's part of your job to make sure 5 is 5 and 6 is 6. So it is okay to do it, but I've not personally done it, but I reckon it would be quite tricky. So use the 10 minutes at the end instead. Yeah, good question. First time I've been asked that. I would say no. So nothing else in chat by the look of it. Nothing else in Q&A. And that's us a little after the hour, so we're about five past. So just leaves me to say, as usual, keep in touch with our Facebook page. Keep working through the guided e-learning support material. You can email me directly, or you can put something on Facebook if you've got any queries or questions. Probably better to put it on Facebook, because if you want to ask the questions, somebody else probably needs to know as well. So thank you very much. Some good questions there today, and I hope you feel a bit more confident with the listening. I don't think about it anymore, but I would find the listening difficult, I think. People say, oh, the writing, but I think if I were doing a foreign language, the listening would be my difficult one. So if it's not a problem for you, well done. It's a difficult skill. And today, your answers were great. Well done. So thank you very much, and I'll see you again at a future webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.